Folks, as Kim mentioned, good evening. My name is Scott Seraphin. Some of you may know from the 6 o'clock sessions that I do on the real estate side of things. Today I'm filling in for Live Baltimore as the moderator, but we're not here to hear from me. I'm just taking care of a little bit of housekeeping before we get things started. So, thank you all for being on time tonight. Thank you for your time. Thank you for participating in our little icebreaker. Tonight's class is the school's 101 conversations with Kim. We know it's not easy to navigate school choices. We understand it's been very difficult. It's certainly an unusual time as well during the pandemic. So that's what these are all about. That's what we're doing tonight. Few items though before we hear from Kim. This is part of Live Baltimore's outreach for our Way to Stay program. Many of you have probably already heard of or talked to our presenter tonight, Kim Wiggins. This is her program. She is the program manager for the Way to Stay program. I'm our program manager for our real estate program. We work well together though, but I don't know too much about school, so I'm here to learn as well. So this is a very informal conversation, as you can already tell. We want you to be able to ask any questions that you are dying to get off your chest. We want you to be able to turn your mics on, your videos, things like that, and then we'll do some Q&A. We're going to start though with a very short recorded presentation. Takes a few minutes. Type your questions into the chat during that. Kim will put them all together and we'll talk about them after the recording is done. So since this is a meeting, like I said, we want it to be personal. So if you want to turn your videos on, that's fine. If you have a question that you want to ask out loud, raise your hand. And then you can always still type things into the chat as well. I'll be monitoring that. And like I said, Kim will be putting them together for afterwards. So we are recording all of this, so you don't have to worry about taking down any notes or anything like that. We're going to send a link out afterwards, so you should all be able to view that. Again, at the end of the event, I'm going to throw a link in there for a brief survey. So if you've been on one of these before, you've probably gotten this link. You've seen we're always trying to get feedback, positive or negative, any constructive criticism we're open to. So you guys will get a link for that. We've got a lot to get to. We've only got about an hour to go tonight. We'll put Kim's contact information there for everything afterwards. But I think with that, we'll get started with the very brief recording. Unless, Kim, you have anything to add real quick?
Nope. I think you're doing great, Scott, as a guest co-host.
We will do the recording. Like I said, put any questions into the chat, and then we'll get to them. So stand by.
I want to thank everybody for joining our session. And I do know that there's lots of different people on our session tonight. So there might be people who have children, people who don't have children, people who have kids in school, people who, your kids are 3 to 4, 5, maybe entering school. So hopefully this will give you a great overview of just what the school situation is like in Baltimore City. And if you have a particular issue that you want to talk to me one-on-one, you'll get plenty of information to schedule a one-on-one appointment with me so that we can talk about your particular situation. There'll be time for you to have questions at the end. So right now we are just going to quickly go through this presentation so we can get to the questions. So for starters, let me tell you a little bit about Live Baltimore. We're a nonprofit that's been around for over 20 years. Our sole mission is to recruit and retain Baltimore City residents. We created a program called Way to Stay, which focuses on family retention. So while different people may leave the city or may stay in the city for different reasons, families have special needs that they pay attention to. So space, they may have outgrown their 2-bedroom row home in Southeast. Support, they want to live in neighborhoods that have other children. And schools. So schools, I wind up spending 99% of my time talking to parents about schools. And when we first started the program, we didn't know that would be the case, but it became more and more evident that that was the thing that people had the most questions about, and people just didn't have any answers to them. So when I started this job, I attended probably over 130 meetings in the first 6 months, and I went to any meeting that had anything to do with schools. And I went to open houses, I went to school family council meetings, I went to PTOs, I went to PTAs, I did all the things. And that gave me a huge breadth of knowledge and all the things that were going on in city schools. And I also made lots of connections, and I was able to help answer these questions for parents. So we decided to start calling me the school navigator because that's what I was doing a lot. I was helping people navigate the schools in the city. So I'm here to help you. Now, when I was out and about, these are questions that would always come up. So people would say, none of my friends are sending their kids to the local school. What's school choice? I always hear that phrase. Can I go to school outside my zone? My neighborhood school is a 3 out of 10. I can't go there, can I? Do I make too much money to go to pre-K? The old lady down the street told us we'd have to move when we had a kid. I'm sure lots of people have seen these questions. I'm sure you have had these questions yourself. I'm sure you ask each other these questions on the playground or maybe at birthday parties. So what we figured out was that parents were asking other parents these questions and no one had the answer. So we like to say it's like the sex education model where teenagers are trying to educate each other about sex when they may not know what they're talking about. So a teenager might say, if you take a shower after you have sex, you won't have a baby. So we all know that is not true. We are here to answer these questions for you all so that you don't have to try to educate yourself, especially when you're just not sure of the answers. And like the old lady down the street definitely doesn't know. So the first thing I'm going to jump into is the biggest question I get, and that is around great schools ratings. So we have a quick slide that says 3 reasons why great schools is bad for Baltimore City. Now, I love my house, but I always look on Zillow and look at different homes that are for sale. And Zillow will have on the bottom a school rating, and it'll say something like, this school is a 3 out of 10. So a couple of things about that. Oftentimes, the school that Zillow mentions isn't even the zone school. So I want to get that off right away. So often that school doesn't even apply to you. Now, the great schools ratings are based solely on test scores. So you don't want to judge your child's success based wholly on a test score, but that's what great schools does for schools. And tests aren't even given until 3rd grade. So when you're looking at a school for pre-K and kindergarten, the test scores may not be indicative of the experience that your kindergartner or pre-K will get. Schools are also penalized for poverty. So Baltimore City is a high poverty school, and a school in, let's say, Howard County or Montgomery County could get a 7 rating, and Baltimore City School could get a 5 rating because it's an extra thing that it gets for being more low income. And then schools are rated on a curve, and the curve is for the whole state of Maryland. So the Baltimore City schools are compared to more affluent counties like Howard County and Montgomery County, which have some of the best school districts in the United States. And then we're graded on a curve because of that. Now, I don't know if you guys remember what a curve is, but in school, and I'd like to tell this story, when I was in college, I took physics and I set the curve in my physics class. So I got a 48 out of 100 on my test. That was about my average, and that would set the curve. So my 48 out of 100 was an A. And then everything else like falls into the middle where like most people were scoring. So like, 20s and 30% would be a B and C. And then you have the outliers who were getting like 10% and they would be failing. So according to Great Schools ratings, most schools fall in the middle between 4 to 7, and those are the ones that are fine schools to go to. And when I say 4 to 7, like that's 4 out of 10, that's 7 out of 10. So all of this information is on the Great Schools website. You kind of have to dig a little to find it, but it's there. So these are some schools that lots of people want to go to in the city, and I just want to make you aware of their ratings. Now, they're still great schools because, like I just said, don't put everything on the rating, but Baltimore Montessori and Patterson Park Charter School are 5 out of 10s. City Neighbors Charter School is a 3 out of 10, and City Neighbors Hamilton is a 4 out of 10. So I'm not saying throw out the ratings. I'm saying when you see Great Schools rating, don't let that be the end all be all. Now, another resource that we have in the Way to Stay program is the Live Baltimore website. Now, the Live Baltimore website has lots of resources for neighborhoods, but it also has some resources for schools. So on this school page, you can see where it talks about public schools, public charter schools, and private schools. And then you'll see a map of the city, and the map of the city has little dots where all of the schools are located, because lots of times it's hard to know that when a school isn't named after the neighborhood that it's in. Like, where's Alexander Hamilton? It's hard to know. So that is, so you can definitely go to our website for a resource as far as schools are concerned. So let's talk a little bit about public schools in Baltimore City. First of all, it's very different than other counties in Maryland. So if you grew up in the suburbs or even another state, where you lived determined where you went to school, and it would determine your elementary school, your middle school, and your high school. In the city, only elementary schools have actual zones. Middle schools and high schools participate in the choice programs. That's something you may have heard about. Many elementary school students enroll out of zones. So if you're in a neighborhood and you think to yourself, none of the neighborhood kids go to your zone school, it's because a large percentage of students, elementary students, go to schools outside of their zone. And then both traditional and charter schools are public schools. So that's a big question that also comes up on the playground, like, are charter schools public schools? And they are. So now let's talk about public charter schools versus traditional public schools. So public charter schools, the seats are determined by lottery. So not just where you live. There are a few charter schools that are zone charter schools, but we don't want to get into that. Most of them are based on the lottery. Attendance is free of charge. So like I said, charter schools are public schools, so they're free. You can apply to as many charter schools as you like. So Baltimore City actually has 50% of the charter schools in the state of Maryland. I mean, over 50% of the charter schools in the state of Maryland. And you could apply to all of them if you want. I do tell people to think about where the schools are located before you apply to all of them, but there's no cost to do it, so you can. You can even apply to the lotteries after the after the lotteries have occurred. All that means is that you automatically go on the wait list. So, so you'll kind of be last in line. Private schools and independent and parochial schools. So lots of times people think that they can't, that they won't get financial aid for independent schools, but you can get financial aid for independent schools making in the low six figures. That's not saying that everybody gets a financial aid. It's just saying that most people just automatically think, oh, I can't qualify for financial aid. But that's information that you'll want to fill out early on to see if you qualify. Also, if you think about independent schools and you're already paying for childcare, I know you may have dreams of all the stuff you'll do with that money once you stop paying childcare. But if you haven't found a school that you feel meets your needs, you may want to look at private schools or independent schools and see. And it won't be that much of a change in your budget. Also, parochial schools are an option. You don't necessarily have to practice the religion for that school to go to a parochial school. It may be a factor as far as entry, but it's not the only thing. So, so those are something to keep an eye for. Homeschooling. Homeschooling definitely has more resources than it may have had back in the day. You may have growing up thinking that homeschool is an isolating thing, but there's many opportunities to interact with other children who are homeschooled, to interact with kids who are in regular school in a homeschooling environment. What I do want to stress is recently lots of people have felt that they were homeschooling, but your children receiving lessons at home from a teacher is different than homeschooling, where as a parent, you are actually picking the curriculum, teaching the curriculum, and you do still have to do some testing so that it can be made sure that you're not just, home watching TV with your child. So let's talk a little bit about early education, because lots of people who take this session are interested in early education. As I said, some people may not even have children yet, and you just need to know now, is Baltimore City schools a viable option for you? So in the, when I talk about early education, I'm going to talk about in the public school model. So your child might currently be in daycare, they may be in preschool, but that's different than pre-3, pre-K, and kindergarten programming that is offered by schools. So let's start with pre-3. There's limited schools with limited spaces. And when I say limited, I mean like 10, so very limited. The programs are half days. There's a few that have full days, but most of them are half days. And half day in public schools is like from 9:30 to 11:30. So it's only 2 hours, but it's called half a day. But just want to make you aware of that as far as scheduling around work. Three, there's a mix of typical and non-typical learners, just to give everyone some exposure. And then it's first come, first serve. So you may think to yourself, why in the world would I ever do this, especially if I have to work around this half day? And what the Pre-3 program does, besides giving your child some socialization experience that is great for all children to have, is there's some sought after pre-K programming where if you're already in the pre-3 programming, you don't have to worry about entering a lottery or the first come, first serve. You're already in. So pre-K, you must be 4 by September 1st of the school year. And priority 1 has preference. And priority 1 is low income, special ed, and homeless. Priority 2 fills the remaining seats, and these seats are limited. But I do want to stress that lots of people feel that priority 2, because the seats are limited, that they automatically make too much money to go to pre-K. But many seats go unfilled in the city every year because people don't even try. So I just want to highlight that you don't necessarily make too much money to go to pre-K. You just find out at a different time. So registration procedures vary by school. And where I said that the time is different, usually priority 2, the acceptance period starts July 1st. Now that's a long time to wait when school starts in August. Like you're trying to make plans and it's hard. So that's why people maybe make other options. That's why people think they can't get in. And that's why other schools maybe do different kinds of registration, because they may know that they don't have enough seats to fill priority 1 seats. So they can let some priority 2 parents know a little earlier that they can get in. So it varies by school, and you'll have to check with the schools, or you can also check with me. Kindergarten, you must be 5 by September 1st of the school year. You're guaranteed a seat in your school. So if you show up the first day of school with your child who is 5 by September 1st in your zone school, they have to take you. Out of zone seats are based on availability and early admission testing. If you have a September baby or an early October baby, you can sign up to get tested early, but just so you know, it doesn't necessarily just test like if they know their colors, if they can read, if they can count. There's other factors, so the test isn't necessarily that easy to pass. What I do want to say on number 3, where out of zone seats are based on availability, is that's from year to year. So you may know somebody who got into some school in kindergarten or even pre-K, and they knew early or whatever. And then you think to yourself, oh, well, so-and-so got into the school, so I'm sure I can too. But it depends every year on how many spaces they have, how many kids they have coming back, how many siblings these children have. So just remember, somebody else's story may not be your story. So, so keep an open mind. So what's next? Take a look at your zone neighborhood school with new eyes. We've talked about great school ratings. It seems hard right now to visit schools, but I can help you with this and talk to other parents. Find other parents in your neighborhood and navigate it together. I know that seems hard because there's so much thoughts around, should you go to charters? Should you go to traditional schools? Should you go to private schools? But you're all in it together, and everyone has to ultimately do what's right for their family. But I feel that it's best just to know what your options are. Visit schools, attend open houses. There's lots of virtual options now. And most often, somebody can schedule a tour with you if you need one. And let us know where you landed. I talk to lots of parents and we do these classes, and oftentimes I never know what happens to people, and maybe I'll run into them in a meeting and they'll say, we go to the school because of you. And I say, yay. So definitely feel free to always reach out to me and let me know where it landed. And then spread the word. We are here to help. Don't feel that you've taken this one class and then you are responsible for all this knowledge. Send people to me and say, I don't know the answers to these questions, but I did take this class and somebody told me, and I'm going to refer you to Kim Wiggins at Live Baltimore. So that is fine. It's not all on you. I am here to help. So with that, I think I sped through that so we can have plenty of times to answer your questions. And thank you so much for attending Schools 101.
All right, that's great.
All right, great. Thank you, Scott. Okay, so and Scott, do you want to get the ball rolling, or do you want me to get the ball rolling?
Well, we start with some of the chat questions.
I think so. I did. There was a question in the chat, which was like, once you accepted into a school via lottery, do you have to enter the lottery every year? And the answer to that is no, you do not. Once you get in the lottery, whatever year you're in there and you're in the school, you stay in that school. If you leave and go to another school, then you do have to go into the lottery to get back into the school.
Rachel has a good one. What if your zone school isn't having any open houses?
That's an excellent question. So it's weird. So what I always tell people is like, so schools, principals went to school to be principals and to educate. But in Baltimore City, where you have per pupil funding and where people have all these options, oftentimes principals are asked to be like CEOs and marketing people and market their school. So some schools have a robust open house schedule and some schools may not. And you think to yourself, well, those schools that have a robust open house schedule, they must really want parents to come. They must be more put together. But oftentimes it's just their principal has a better understanding of marketing than the other principals. So both principals are fine with education, which is what you want for your children, but one principal may have a different eye on marketing. Also, sometimes there's a stronger organized parent group that may also take some of this load off. So it just depends. Some schools are often just over enrolled. So their zone feeds enough into it to where they don't necessarily need to have open houses because they're getting enough from their zone. So there's different reasons, but to the question about like, so what do you do? How do you get to see the school? So then you can reach out to the school and see about seeing the school and seeing about touring the school. What I do tell people is sometimes that's hard if the school doesn't have a process set up for that. And what I mean is you call the school and like the secretary answers and you're like, I'd like to go see the school because my pre-K child is about to come. And the secretary is not often the nicest person at city schools. I don't know why. It's like they get the meanest person and that person has always had a bad day. But what I tell people is that person will not be responsible for the instruction of your child. Your child will probably very rarely see this person. And if you can get into the pre-K and kindergarten teachers, they're wonderful people that love fuzzy animals and everything. So it sometimes it takes a while. I always tell people to connect with me because sometimes I have different relationships and I have definitely sugared up in the before times, I definitely sugared up all of the like cantankerous admins. But you can definitely reach out to me and sometimes you can schedule something within the school. I wish I had a better answer for it, but sometimes it is difficult and it depends on the school.
How about this is a good one. This makes perfect sense. Once a child is in via lottery or out of zone acceptance, do their siblings automatically get in?
So not automatically. There's something called sibling preference. So I'll start with charter schools because that's the easiest one and it's definitely a rule for it. Is that if you have a sibling in it, when the lottery happens, the siblings are like the first round of the lottery. So they pull from all the siblings first. And then once they pull that, then any opening spaces come from just the regular lottery. So in charter schools, siblings do get a preference. Now, if for some reason, which usually doesn't happen, if there's like no spots, then the sibling is an automatic. Now, where I've seen this happen is like, let's say you have a kindergartner and a second grader, and your kindergartner gets in. So your second grader does have a preference above anyone else who's trying to get into second grade, but let's say there's no second grade spots. Then there's just literally no spots for the second grader to get in. Now, if somebody leaves or goes someplace, then the sibling second grader has a first shot at it. But if there's no spots, like they can't create a spot for them. And then the other question was like, and so if you're out of zone, yes, there's an unspoken sibling preference because nobody wants to break families up. Like no one wants to have like two siblings and the other siblings going to the other school, right? But it depends. It depends on space. But the desire is once you have a sibling in, is if there's preferences to accept all the siblings.
Cool. Liz is wondering how to assess if a child is ready for pre-K. Do schools help with that, or are you just going to take a chance that they will do okay when applying?
The easy answer is you take a chance. But I'll say if they're already in like daycare or something like that, then lean on their teachers to let you know if they're ready or not for pre-K. Pre-K, you have to be 4 by September 1st. So lots of it's just socialization and things like that. So you're not, it's hard to not be ready for pre-K. There's some people who think their kids aren't ready for kindergarten, and you can do a maturity waiver for that and have them do pre-K again, like that. That's fine. But pre-K, a lot of it's about socialization. But if they're in a daycare already, like let their teacher should be able to assess that. The daycare teacher should be able to assess that. Otherwise, there's really no assessment process about whether or not they're ready for pre-K. You can just put them in pre-K.
Okay, thank you, Kim. And then we're gonna ask Lucretia. She's got her hand raised.
I know,
Go ahead
a hand raised. So exciting.
Turn your video on if you feel like it. Go ahead.
Hi, my question is, my daughter goes to an elementary middle school, and I plan on probably moving in within the next year. Will she still be able to go to the middle, because she's in the 5th grade now, so she'll be going to 6th. Will she be able to go to the middle school, even though it may not be in our zoned area?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So I would say it could depend on the actual school. So what the rule would be is that they would go to their zone school, but they could try to get an out of zone placement at the school that they're already in. But nobody's doing that. Like let's say they've been there from K to 5th grade, like they're not going to be like, "Up, see you, you're gone." So more often than not, your child can matriculate up to 6th grade. Now, what becomes an issue is like, let's say you move across town and then you become an attendance problem, like it's hard for you to get to school on time and things like that. Then they will look at look at you being out of zone and say like you need to go back to your zone school. But if you're just moving along, like for the most part, like you're fine. Also, no one's going to check. I don't work for city schools. I'm just telling you, no one's checking every year to make sure you haven't moved. So if you're at the school, you're going every day, whatever, like even if you have to fill out some form and you say and mail is going to some other place, like no one's pulling your address up to see if you are out of zone unless you become an attendance problem, and then they'll start to look at it.
Okay, thank you.
But don't go to your school and say, Kim Wiggins said that I could stay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Kim, it's so funny that you say those. I don't work for city schools. I don't work for the housing department either.
Right. You just have to tell, just things happen. And like, there's like these big rule books and policies and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't know why somebody spent like all this time writing a 20-page policy that nobody follows. Anyway, once again, don't work for city schools.
There's a lot of similarities. Funny. Right. Sarah with an H says, how early do you need to start talking to schools about priority 2 pre-K admission?
This seems like the perfect time for me to unveil a new thing that I created. So I am sorry that Misty isn't here, who is my regular co-presenter, because when we started doing these classes in December of 2020, I can't remember time anymore, but yeah, that sounds right. November of 2020. I kept answering these questions like, when do you start trying to get out of zone? When do you apply to charters? Why are people having open houses? So I would say these same things again. And then I joked and said, oh, I need a graphic for this. So a year later, and I like to say 9 months because it was like I had a baby. I have a graphic and it just got finalized like 2 days ago. And you guys are the first people to see this outside of Live Baltimore. So I'm about to share. I was all excited about it. Now I can't find out what I did. Okay, ready. I'm about to share this now. It's going to seem like a lot when you first see it. Just warning you, it's going to seem like a lot. But, okay. Can you guys see it? It says school planning timeline for your kid.
Yeah, it just came through.
There it is.
All right, so we will send this out to you because, like I said, it's hot off the press, and so it's not like kind of any document. And the writing seems kind of small in it, but pretty much what it is just a timeline of like when you start stuff, and it's across the calendar year because there seem to be so many moving parts. And like, what do you do, and when do you start? And sometimes you hear, you know, in March that people already applied to charter schools, and you were out in the world thinking that you could start doing something in May, and you've already missed the deadlines. So saying this a million times, I was like, we need a visualization of it. And honestly, like once I saw this visualization, I was like, my God, this is a lot of ridiculous information. That's all true. But to answer your question, as far as like, when do you start thinking about trying to get out of zone in a school? It depends on the school and it depends on the grade that you're trying. So pre-K is different than kindergarten. Pre-K is different with depending on how many pre-K classes they are and whether or not you're priority 1 and priority 2. So it makes it a case-by-case basis. What I will say is that you can start looking at the schools like in March and April and May, like the ones that are having open houses, and just to kind of get a feel for like what the numbers are. And the example that I like to give is there's a school that, I don't know, does a complicated registration process that starts in February. I'm not going to call them out or whatever, but the reason they do this is because they have 3 pre-K classes. And that gives you 69 possible pre-K students. And then if priority 1 starts first, and that starts in May, they know that they do not have 69. I'm going to stop sharing this but I just want you guys to see it. Or should I leave it up? I don't know. What do you think? I'll leave it up so you guys can look at it. I'll leave it up.
I think you can leave it up. There's a couple questions that I think can also come back.
Did I put it up and everybody was like, whoa? Okay, so I was just excited to share. I didn't think it through. Okay, but what this school does, they have 69 spaces. They know that they do not have 69 priority 1 students in their zone. So they do some process where they're like, let us know if you want to come and we will be able to give you a reasonable idea of where we can place you like in March. So we'll let you know like where you are and whether or not you're in the bubble. It's kind of exactly like March Madness. So they can let you know like if you're in, and then if you're on the bubble. And when I went back and looked at their numbers, they did this for 1 year. They only had 10 priority 1 pre-K students for 69 spots. So if they had waited till July before they let anybody know whether or not they could go in priority 2, like those people would have just made other plans. They would have just been like, forget this. I can't wait till July. I'll take somebody else. And then they would have all these spots that they're scrambling to try to fill in July. So they were able to do it. So then it kind of just depends on the individual school. And I'm going to put my Calendly link in the chat. And what that means is that if you want to have a one-on-one appointment about your particular situation, you can. But also if you want to, I see that we have lots of questions in the chat. Woo, this flyer was like, wah! But you can feel free to like say your school name and I can kind of talk about the chances of that. Also, after the pandemic, things have been weird with people enrolling and not enrolling. But what I will say is, and there was a recent story in NPR where enrollment's down just everywhere. But I will say I see a lot of parents coming back to schools now that 5 and above can get vaccinated. So I think it might be a little more cutthroat next year, but 2022, 23, but we'll see.
Awesome. Yeah. And Kim, you mentioned your Calendly link. I did just drop that link into the chat for everybody. So if you do want to do a one-on-one, you can go right through there. All right, we've got, let me scroll back up. Sarah, without the H, said a little while ago, can you provide any details on navigating the out-of-zone process?
So it depends on the grade. So for, it depends. Sarah, can you tell me what grade you're thinking about?
can unmute or type that into the chat. Kindergarten.
Kindergarten. Okay. So then kindergarten depends on how many spots they have. So for instance, I'm going to use the example that everybody like, can I get into kindergarten at Roland Park? Probably not. There's lots of people trying to get into kindergarten at Roland Park. The pre-K kids are matriculating up. They have to serve the kids in their zone. And so oftentimes their kindergarten class winds up being fairly large because they have to serve all these people. So a school also doesn't want to take as many kids as wants to go in, because then you have a kindergarten class that has 40 kids, and that doesn't serve anyone. So then it kind of depends on year to year, and it depends on how many kindergarten classes they have and how many pre-K kids are matriculating up. So just it depends. It depends on where you're trying to go for out of zone. Like Hampstead Hill is another one that's hard to serve kids out of the zone. So it just depends. Like I wish I could say something better than that. But what you do is you go to their open houses and you get a feel. But they're not really going to be able to tell you anything until you won't be able to make a move really until July.
Very good. We'll do Miriam's, and then Kate will get to yours as well. Miriam says, what are typical school hours for city schools? Does everyone have before and or after care?
The hours are all over the place. They can range from early as like 7 something to as late as 9 something, and then the get out time and the dismissal time like is in line with whatever the start time was. Not all schools have before and after care for various reasons. Some schools are attached to a rec center, and the rec center provides before and after care. Some schools have an independent contractor that provides before and after care. Some schools just don't have it at all. That is a result of per pupil funding, where schools have the money to provide whatever services they can provide. And honestly, like schools just don't have money to provide before and after care. So either they contract it with somebody from the outside, or sometimes they just don't have it at all.
Kim, is that something that's on our schools pages, the start times and times for a lot of these?
It is not. Just because they can change every year. So like after the pandemic, everyone changed, and I used to track it, but it just became hard to manage. But there is if you go to the city schools website on the schools page, you can look it up by school.
Got it. Just on the city's website. All right. And then I see Miriam, I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question. Thank you. I was just wondering, are there private before care or after care or any other sort of, if I go to a school that doesn't have aftercare, could I arrange for my child to go to aftercare somewhere else, or are there private ones that we could tap into?
Yeah, so sometimes people have like, I don't want to say pods, but we'll have like, if they're in the same neighborhood, we'll have somebody that like maybe picks up their kids and like does something with them after school. There's nothing that stops you from like having some kind of private thing. If you lots of the ones that are run out of schools are run at that schools. There are a few independent ones that like, I don't know, do some service where they like pick up kids and take them someplace. Like I know, like, I don't know, somebody says that their kid does like Taekwondo and they pick them up from a couple of schools and go to this place, but they are really all over the place. I will say that city schools is trying to do this thing where they try to essentially locate like vendors that do things like this. And it's called like the pie porthole, which is partners something. I know it's called PIE. I can't remember what the acronym is. So in theory, what they're trying to do is have like the centralized location where you can find these resources. That hasn't quite come to fruition, but I think it's in the works. But what I suggest to people is like figure out what other people in your neighborhood are doing and see if you can join them that way. And then also, depending on what school you wind up going to, like I know schools who didn't have before and after care, but their parents were like, hey, like we we need this to happen. Like we can't, like we're not getting home until 6 or whatever reason, like we need before care and after care to happen. And there's, fitness, fun and games is a major provider. All Lives United is a major provider. So there's nothing which stops parents from having the school reach out and say, hey, like, can we look at this? The disconnect that I often see in schools is schools will say things like, oh, well, my parents don't want to pay for this, or they can't pay. And it's like, well, you need to ask your parents, because your parents also, like, somebody needs to take care of their kids. So like, don't make this decision for them. Let them decide. So
these are all really great questions. Keep typing away. We still got about 15. We're about 15 minutes, still give or take. Kate with a good one here. Try and sum it up. It's a longer one, but thinking of changing neighborhoods in the next couple of years. I'm glad that you threw in you're going to stay in Baltimore, so that's great. What's the best way to get information about neighborhood schools? Or excuse me, what's the best way to get information about neighborhood schools in a range of neighborhoods just beyond the test scores? So, for example, is the PTA active? Principal been there a long time? Teacher satisfaction turn. Where's the best resource for as much info on these things as you can get?
Sadly, I would say you should schedule a one-on-one for me and with me, and we can just look at different neighborhoods and think about what you're thinking. Like, are you moving because you need more space? Are you moving because you want grass? Are you moving because you need to be closer to someplace? And then once we figure that out, kind of look at the different schools and see what's going on, like see what principals have tenure, see what has active parent groups, because you cannot, like, there's no place that you can go, like on city school website or whatever, where it's like they have an active parent group. Like, that doesn't exist. I'm sorry about that. It just doesn't exist. And you do have a thing that talks about like how, like, the tenure of teachers, but it kind of like pools like every adult in that school and how long they've been there. So then that doesn't stop the fact that your child can have like a second grade teacher where that's their first year. Maybe the fifth grade teacher's been there for 20 years. So it's really like schedule a one-on-one with me and we can talk it out. And then also the thing about principals is principals can leave, they can get promoted, they can, things can happen. So you definitely have to look at like all the parts. And but yeah, I would say schedule a one-on-one with me.
And I'll just plug our own website. If you're not familiar with livebaltimore.com, is probably the best resources for that. Not just the schools page, which I just threw into the chat, but also each neighborhood has its own profile and it tells you what schools are in there. Many of them also have what we call neighborhood ambassadors. So you could reach out to somebody in that neighborhood that might have kids in the school there, and just ask them firsthand too. But like Kim said, get a better feel for it really just by talking to her. She's the number one resource, and then our website, and then city schools website.
Right. Yeah. Use them in tandem, like as far as the neighborhoods, definitely our website will let you know, like if you want walkability, if you want artsy, if you want grass and stuff. Like, and I always use grass as an example because lots of times people are like, I just need grass. And I'm like, there's plenty of vacant lots that you can mow. But we also have neighborhoods that have grass. So
hopefully that helps. I'll kind of throw some general questions that we got out here, so there's nothing really left over here in the box. But I'm seeing Miriam, is your hand up again? Do you have another question?
Yes.
Great.
Yes. I actually have a bit of a housing question and a bit of a school question, since you brought up the housing. So it seems like, my family will have to move. We need a home that is handicap accessible, and those are really hard to come by in Baltimore. So any home that has a first floor bedroom bathroom, they're just really hard to come by. So I was just wondering, on the housing department, do y'all know of a neighborhood that has more of these either ranch style houses, or just more likely to find that kind of primary or first floor bedroom bathroom setup? And then that's like the first part of the question. And then the second part of the question is, I think we're the rare person that I'd love to stay in a Baltimore City school, but because the housing stock is so limited, we have to be open to moving outside of the city. So I was wondering, would it ever be possible to actually attend a city school if I live outside in another county?
So I guess actually Scott can probably answer your question as far as like what kind of housing stocks may have a like a first floor bedroom and be more handicap accessible. But to the question about if you can attend a city school outside, like where you live in the county, you can. There's like a tuition process, like where you actually like wind up paying your per pupil funding to attend a school outside, and then the same things apply where there has to be space for it. Space for like whatever grade you're looking at. And then the what I will say with that, and that situation happens a lot with like children who want to attend Baltimore School for the Arts. So county kids will want to attend that school just for the art aspect of it. So yeah, that's the process for that. But I tell people to think about like how close you are, like is it a long drive? Because once again, if you become an attendance problem, then they will ask you to leave.
Sure.
And Scott, what do you think about housing?
Miriam, I just put my email into the chat there. I want to follow up with you again kind of after this because I really don't know a good answer for that. What I would probably do is put it out. We have a numerous number of real estate agents that we partner with that probably would be better off diving into that with you or with me as well. So I'll follow up with you again. I believe there are some actual programs too that are out there that you could qualify for that can make it a little more compliant. Like you could use grant programs and things like that to help bring it up to your needs to something like that. But I'm not as familiar as I should be with those. So I'll follow up with you again afterwards on that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that one, don't have a good one. There's a few that come to mind, but yeah, I think kind of like what Kim says with the one-on-one experience, we'll do something with that.
Yeah, I've definitely seen in Hamilton, like in the Northeast, like homes that have like wheelchair ramps. Obviously I don't know what the inside of them looks like, but I can see how from the outside they've been converted to be like handicap accessible. But
yeah, the row houses with all the stoops, pretty difficult.
Mm-hmm.
That actually is a fairly good lead into one of the questions that I also get all the time is, specific towards neighborhoods is, what's safe, what's a good neighborhood there. And then Kim, what schools are safe, or what do you say? Like, how do we know if a school is safe? That's a general question that we always get.
Thank you. I forgot that I was sharing screens and I covered up because I had some other questions to make sure I got rid of. So I'll put that in school planning timeline. Thank you for letting me know. So I'll take this off because you guys will get this. Okay. Hi, everyone. So when people often ask me about safe, and then I'm always like, well, what do you mean by safe? Because oftentimes people when we think about safety in schools, school shooting safety, because it shows that that just isn't what happens in urban settings, as far as just the school shootings that you see in the national news. So then it's kind of well, what's the safety inside the school? What's the safety outside the school? And especially if it's your neighborhood school, you're familiar with how your neighborhood is. And Baltimore is Baltimore. I know lots of parents are kind of worried about their little kids in schools with bigger kids. So pre-K and pre-K to 8th grade schools. But what I always tell people is that the schools are set up in a way where the little kids usually have separate entrances. They're self-contained oftentimes. They're in the cafeteria on their own. They have their own playground. And then the overarching thing is big kids protect little kids. Lots of them have brothers and sisters at home, and they don't mess with these little kids. So that's the biggest thing that I see parents worry about, because they just think about their 4-year-old with a 14-year-old. And that does seem scary because 14-year-olds are big when you look at them next to a 4-year-old. But they really have separate settings, and then the big kids, look after them. So then if it's some other safety thing, then I would need to know specifically what that is. But I think a lot of what I hear is the whole big kids with little kids.
Great. Miriam's got another question here. I'm specifically interested in Baltimore International Academy. Heard that they just opened up a second location. Talk about the new one. Do you know about it? What are some of the differences?
Yes. So the main difference is one is on the east side and one is on the west side. So it's just they all offer the same languages. So for those who aren't familiar with Baltimore International Academy, it's a charter school and their curriculum is language immersion. And they have 5 languages. They have Chinese, Russian, Arabic, French, and Spanish. That sounded like 5. And so then there's one that's located on the east side and one that's located on the west side. If you would apply, you have to apply to them separately. And then you also have to pick a language track. And then they accept like kindergarten and first grader, but you can't really get in there at like 3rd or 5th grade unless you test in with language because it is language immersion. You don't start to learn English or do like English things until 2nd grade. So I tell parents is you have to be okay with that. Like, you know, if language is important to you, then apply to that school and that's where you want to go. And you may have to supplement other things. If you want your child reading Harry Potter in 1st grade, you know, unless they can already do that, they're not going to learn that at BIA. So, you know, I just tell people to be honest about like what you want. And language is great. I personally believe that kids should learn language when they're young because that's when it's easier to learn. And I have parents who've gone to that school and they say like, you know, after the 1st year, their kid is definitely speaking like whatever language they speak. I have a very close friend whose husband's French and she speaks French and they sent their kids there for French and like, they're all Frenchy people. But they were happy with it, but they knew they had to supplement other things for it. Did I answer the whole question about that? Yeah. So the main difference is they're different locations, and the buildings are different, obviously.
How about just grades? Is there any difference in grades? Does their kindergarten program start in 1st grade?
It's kindergarten through 8th grade.
Cool. That your original answer actually triggered one for me. Was did we talk about transportation to school? What are some of the options for transport? How do kids get there?
Yeah, no options.
I don't have kids. So I don't know.
Yeah. So sadly, you walk to school. So like, especially like for the out of school questions, like how do you get to school out of school? And this is why I always stress in charter schools too. Like think about driving your kid to school, driving back, picking them up from school and coming back because they don't have transportation to charter schools because they're out of zone. If they have a special ed need where their zone school can't provide services, then they can get transportation. If they're a mile outside of their zone school, then they can get transportation. I will like to highlight that right now there's like a huge transportation shortage because there aren't enough bus drivers, and that's also nationwide. So that causes some complications with things. And then older kids ride the bus and they can get an S-Pass from their school, which gives them a discount of riding the bus.
Got me typing into the chat. We've got a few minutes here left. You can get any last minute questions in on here. Feel free to unmute, raise your hand, whatever you'd like. I said we try and keep it around an hour, but if it's anything like my classes, they usually run a little longer. I am right now, while we wait for some final questions, I'm throwing in the next date for Kim's next Schools 101 Conversations with Kim is going to be January 13th. The registration is live for that already. So that is at livebaltimore.com/events. Just put that in there. I failed to put your contact information in there before I sent the Calendly link, but now I'm giving everybody your email address as well.
Yeah. And I also haven't updated my Calendly for January. Like I figured out how to do it for December, and now I've lost all my brain cells. And I tried to update it like last night for January. And I was like, how did I even do this before? I was so excited. And I'm like, fail.
So that means you have a wide open schedule. Plenty of openings in January.
As far as I can tell, I couldn't even get it to move to January. I was like, well, technology, like 2021, I'm done. But I will say, Scott and I actually are holding down the Live Baltimore office over the holiday. So while pretty much everyone is taking off, like we will be there. So I have plenty of openings in December to chat. Anything to take up my time while I'm working over the holidays, I will welcome.
All right, another question came in here. Do you know roughly what the range is for the cost of tuition if you're coming from a different county into a city school?
It's around $10,000.
Yeah, simple.
I can find the actual number, but it's pretty much, I think it's like to support like the per pupil funding. Let me see, I will, like while we're talking, because I feel like I actually had this with a parent who lived in the city but wanted to go out of zone, and they were like, oh, that's gonna be $10,000. And I was like, it's not $10,000 like that, like she lived in the city. But but I was like, oh, that's good to know how much that amount is. So.
All right, and while you're looking that up, Kim, I'm just putting some more other helpful links into the chat here. If you want to find your zone school, I just put the Baltimore City Schools website in there. If you're not sure, you can check that out. While you're doing that as well, I did mention our survey. For those of you still here on the call, just put the link in for the survey. It'd be great if you could take a minute or two to fill that out. Correct me if I'm wrong, it probably gets emailed as well. We'll include that PDF that you brought up in the email as well. So the timeline chart, I'll be giving copies out to all of our realtors as well. It's a great tool.
$1,000 a year, I was exactly right. Man, look at that. Yes, it's 10,000. Yeah, and you won't get the link tonight of the video. Like you should get it, I would say, maybe not tomorrow, maybe Monday.
Yeah, we got to do some editing.
Yeah. All right. I think we're
Great
good.
job, Kim. This has been helpful for me as well. So
Yeah.
I appreciate being able to fill in.
Yeah, you're welcome to co-host anytime. I'm sure Misty will love that. And thank you guys for joining. And thank you for all your questions and making this a great call. And really, like, reach out to me if you want to talk about your specific situation. Sometimes I feel sad that I can't just give like broad brushes to everything, but it's very nuanced, and I'm sorry that it's like that. But it just changes year to year, and then it's different for what school you want to go to. And then, we're different as families, and you just have lots of options in Baltimore City, and options are good and options are bad.
Yeah, definitely. If anybody has any housing questions, anything related to like that, Miriam, I'll be sure to check that out for you and follow up for sure. Feel free to reach out to me as well.
Oh, thank you, Miriam. Hi, Kate.
All right.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Have a good rest of your night. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.